The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Maple Street when the first police cruiser rounded the corner, its engine humming with purpose. Officer Martinez gripped his radio tighter as dispatch crackled through the static. Suspicious individual, possibly under the influence. Casing residences on the 1400 block. Behind him. Officer Chen reached for his sidearm, both men watching as a figure approached the white colonial house at the end of the street. The boy moved with an uneven gait, his left leg dragging slightly behind his right, his shoulders tilting with each labored step. In his trembling hands, he clutched a small canvas bag, its contents rustling with each movement. The officers exchanged glances, their training kicking in as they prepared for what they believed was an imminent drug transaction. 15-year-old Eli Morrison had no idea that two patrol cars were silently positioning themselves behind him. His mind was focused on the address written in careful handwriting on the prescription bottle, 1472 Maple Street. Mrs. Patterson, age 73, diabetic, insulin dependent. The Riverside High School Community Service Program had paired him with the local pharmacy for his mandatory volunteer hours, and he took the responsibility seriously. The cerebral palsy that affected his left side had never stopped him from wanting to help others. If anything, it had taught him compassion for those who struggled with their own challenges. His mother, Sarah, had been skeptical at first. "Are you sure you can handle walking that far? Sweetheart, it's almost 2 miles to the Maple Street area." But Eli had insisted, his brown eyes bright with determination. "Mom, I can do this. Mrs. Chen at the pharmacy said I'm their most reliable volunteer." The morning had started perfectly. Eli had carefully organized his delivery route, checking each address twice, ensuring the medications were properly secured in his insulated bag. The October air was crisp, leaves crunching beneath his uneven footsteps as he made his way through the familiar neighborhood surrounding the school. He had already completed 3 successful deliveries, each recipient greeting him with warmth and gratitude. But as he turned onto Maple Street, the atmosphere shifted. The tree-lined avenue was quieter than the others, with larger homes set back from the road behind manicured lawns. Eli felt eyes watching him from behind curtained windows, though he attributed the sensation to his own self-consciousness about his distinctive walk. Karen Whitfield stood in her kitchen, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against the granite countertop as she peered through her designer blinds. At 45, she prided herself on being the unofficial guardian of Maple Street's property values and community standards. Her husband's promotion to senior partner at the law firm had afforded them the luxury of the neighborhood's most expensive home, and she intended to protect that investment. "What is that person doing?" she muttered to herself. Watching Eli's slow progress down the sidewalk, his jerky movements, and the way he kept checking something in his bag, triggered every alarm in her suspicious mind. She had seen enough crime documentaries to recognize suspicious behavior when she saw it. Her fingers found her phone before she could second-guess herself. The emergency dispatcher's voice was calm and professional. 911, what's your emergency?" "I need to report a suspicious person in my neighborhood," Karen said, her voice rising with each word. "There's someone who looks like they're on drugs, walking funny, jerky movements, going from house to house. I think he's casing the area for break-ins." "Can you describe the individual, ma'am?" "Young male, maybe Hispanic or mixed race, wearing a dark hoodie. He keeps stopping at houses and looking around nervously. The way he's walking, it's not natural, like someone high on something." Karen's imagination was running wild now, each innocent movement Eli made seeming more sinister through her lens of prejudice and fear. Meanwhile, Eli had stopped in front of 1468 to double-check his route. Mrs. Patterson's house was just 4 doors down, and he wanted to make sure he had the correct address. The insulin delivery was time-sensitive, and he had promised the pharmacy he would have it there by 3 o'clock. His phone showed 2:47 p.m. As he resumed walking, Karen burst through her front door, her designer athleisure outfit a stark contrast to the urgency in her movements. She strode across her lawn, her voice carrying across the quiet street. "Hey you! What are you doing in this neighborhood?" Eli looked up, startled. A woman was approaching him rapidly, her face flushed with anger and suspicion. He stopped walking, his natural instinct to be polite despite the aggressive tone. "I'm making a delivery, ma'am. Medical supplies." "Sure you are," Karen scoffed, pulling out her phone to record. "I've been watching you stumble around here for 10 minutes. You're obviously intoxicated, or on something. What's really in that bag?" The accusation hit Eli like a physical blow. He had faced ignorance about his condition before, but never such open hostility. His voice remained steady, despite the hurt building in his chest. "I have cerebral palsy, ma'am. That's why I walk differently. I'm delivering medication to Mrs. Patterson at 1472. "Don't lie to me." Karen stepped closer, her phone capturing every moment. "I know what drug addicts look like, and that jerky, twitchy movement isn't fooling anyone. You're probably delivering drugs, not picking them up." The cruelty of her words made Eli's stomach turn. He had spent years building confidence despite his disability, working with physical therapists, enduring stares and whispers, only to have this stranger reduce him to a harmful stereotype. "Please, I just need to deliver this insulin. Mrs. Patterson is expecting it." "Insulin, right." Karen moved to block his path, her camera still rolling. "You can't even walk straight. There's no way they'd trust someone like you with medical deliveries. Stop lying and tell me what you're really doing here." The sound of approaching sirens cut through the afternoon air. Karen smiled with satisfaction, while Eli felt his heart rate spike with anxiety. He had done nothing wrong, but he knew how situations like this could escalate quickly. His mother had always warned him about the dangers he might face as a young person of color, even in supposedly safe neighborhoods. 2 police cars pulled up to the curb, their occupants emerging with hands resting on their duty belts. Officer Martinez, a veteran with 15 years of experience, took the lead while Officer Chen, newer to the force but eager to prove himself, flanked from the other side. "We received a call about suspicious activity," Martinez said, his voice professional but tinged with the assumption that where there was smoke, there was fire. "Can you tell us what you're doing in this neighborhood?" Before Eli could answer, Karen launched into her narrative. "Officers, thank goodness you're here. This person has been stumbling around the neighborhood for 20 minutes, going from house to house with that bag. When I confronted him, he claimed to be delivering medicine. But look at him. He can barely stand upright. He's obviously impaired." Officer Chen studied Eli's trembling hands and unsteady posture, his training suggesting possible intoxication. "Son, have you been drinking or using any substances today?" The question, though procedural, felt like another slap to Eli's dignity. "No, sir. I have cerebral palsy. It affects my motor control and balance." He reached slowly into his bag, mindful of the officer's positioning. "I have my school ID and the delivery information from Morrison's pharmacy." But Karen wasn't finished. "He's been practicing that story. Officers, I've been watching him. The way he moves, the way he keeps checking that bag, looking around nervously. This is obviously some kind of drug operation." "Ma'am, please step back and let us handle this," Martinez said. Though his attention remained focused on Eli, the teenager's movements were certainly unusual. And, in his experience, unusual often meant suspicious. Eli's hands shook more violently as he tried to extract his identification. the stress of the situation exacerbating his condition. The simple task of reaching into his bag, something he had done dozens of times that day, now seemed impossible under the weight of multiple stares and assumptions. "Take your time," Officer Martinez said. Though his patience was clearly wearing thin, the dispatcher had mentioned possible drug activity, and the longer this interaction took, the more convinced he became that something wasn't right. Finally, Eli managed to produce his school ID card and a folder containing the day's delivery receipts. His Riverside High Community Service Program identification was clear and official, complete with his photo and the pharmacy's contact information. Officer Chen examined the documents, while Martinez called the school to verify the program's existence. But Karen wasn't deterred by the evidence mounting against her initial assessment. "Those could be fake," she insisted, her voice getting shriller. "Anyone can print up fake IDs these days. Look at him. He's shaking. He can't walk straight. He's clearly on something. Don't let him fool you with some sob story about a disability." The word sob story cut through Eli like a knife. His disability wasn't a story or an excuse. It was a daily reality that he had learned to navigate with grace and determination. But this woman was reducing his entire existence to a convenient lie, a cover for imagined criminal activity. "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice," Martinez said, though he continued to eye Eli with suspicion. The verification call to the school had gone to voicemail, and, without immediate confirmation, he couldn't rule out the possibility that the documents were falsified. It was then that Mrs. Patterson's front door opened. The elderly woman, moving slowly with her walker, had heard the commotion and emerged to investigate. She was a tiny figure, barely 5 feet tall, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. "What's all this noise about?" she called out, her voice carrying despite its fragility. When she spotted Eli surrounded by police officers, her expression shifted to one of concern and confusion. "Eli, what's happening? Dear, do you have my insulin?" The question hung in the air like a revelation. Karen's confident expression faltered for the first time, while the officers looked between Eli and the elderly woman with growing understanding. "Mrs. Patterson," Eli said, relief flooding his voice. "Yes, ma'am. I have your medication right here. I'm sorry I'm a few minutes late." Mrs. Patterson shuffled closer, her walker scraping against the sidewalk. "Late, honey. You're right on time. I was just getting worried when I heard all the yelling." She looked pointedly at Karen, then at the police officers. "This young man has been delivering my medication for 3 weeks now. He's the most reliable, polite person the pharmacy has ever sent." The truth of the situation began to settle over the gathered crowd like a heavy blanket. Officer Chen looked down at the delivery receipt in his hand, which clearly listed Mrs. Patterson's address and insulin prescription. Officer Martinez ended his call to the school, having finally reached someone who confirmed Eli's participation in the community service program. But Karen wasn't ready to back down. The embarrassment of being wrong was compounding her initial prejudice, creating a toxic mixture of defensiveness and doubled-down accusation. "Well, how was I supposed to know? Look at how he walks. It's not normal." Mrs. Patterson's eyes flashed with an anger that seemed to transform her frail appearance into something formidable. "Not normal, young lady. This boy has more character and kindness in his little finger than you've shown in this entire display. He walks different because he has cerebral palsy. And, if you had an ounce of compassion, you'd be ashamed of yourself right now." The elderly woman's words carried the weight of lived experience and moral authority. She had raised 4 children, worked as a nurse for 40 years, and seen enough of human nature to recognize both its worst and best qualities. Her defense of Eli was fierce and unwavering. "Mrs. Patterson, I was just trying to protect the neighborhood," Karen began, but her justification sounded hollow, even to her own ears. "Protect us from what? From a teenager doing volunteer work? From someone helping elderly people get their medication?" Mrs. Patterson's voice rose with indignation. "You called the police on a disabled child for walking while different. That's not protection. That's prejudice." Officer Martinez cleared his throat. The situation having taken a turn he hadn't expected when he responded to the call. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "it appears this young man is exactly who he says he is. His identification checks out. His story is verified. And Mrs. Patterson confirms he's her regular delivery person." But the confrontation had attracted more attention than just the police. Other neighbors had begun to emerge from their homes, drawn by the commotion. Among them was Janet Rodriguez, whose own son had cerebral palsy, and who recognized immediately what was happening. "What's going on here?" Janet demanded, her protective instincts activated by the sight of a disabled teenager surrounded by authority figures. When the situation was explained to her, her face darkened with anger. "You called the police on him for walking with cerebral palsy?" she asked Karen incredulously. "Do you have any idea what you've just put this child through? The fear? The humiliation?" More neighbors gathered, and the consensus was clearly turning against Karen. But the situation was about to take another significant turn. A white sedan pulled up behind the police cars, and Principal Williams from Riverside High School stepped out, his expression grim. Dr. Williams was a tall, imposing man in his 50s who had dedicated his career to education and social justice. He had received the call from Officer Martinez's verification request and immediately driven to the scene, knowing that his students' safety and dignity were at stake. "Officers, I'm Dr. Williams, principal at Riverside High," he announced, approaching the group with purposeful strides. "I understand there's been some confusion about one of our community service volunteers." His presence brought a new level of authority to the situation. Dr. Williams had been an educator for 25 years and had dealt with every kind of crisis imaginable. But the sight of Eli, clearly shaken and surrounded by police, activated his deepest protective instincts. "Eli, are you all right?" he asked, his voice gentle but his eyes hard as they surveyed the scene. "Have you been hurt or threatened in any way?" "No, sir. I'm okay. I was just trying to deliver Mrs. Patterson's insulin," Eli said, though his voice still trembled with the aftermath of adrenaline and emotion. Dr. Williams turned to Officer Martinez. "Can you explain to me how a 15-year-old boy performing community service ended up surrounded by police officers?" The officer gestured toward Karen. "We received a call about suspicious activity. The caller reported someone appearing to be under the influence, moving erratically through the neighborhood. When we arrived, we were just verifying the young man's story." "And did it occur to anyone to ask about his disability before assuming criminal activity?" Dr. Williams' question was pointed and professional, but carried an undertone of barely controlled anger. Before anyone could answer, another vehicle arrived on the scene. This time, it was a news van from Channel 7, having monitored police radio traffic and recognizing a potential story. Reporter Sarah Kim emerged with her cameraman, immediately assessing the situation. The arrival of the media transformed the dynamic completely. Karen, who had been growing increasingly defensive, suddenly realized the full implications of her actions. This wasn't just a neighborhood disagreement anymore. It was becoming a public incident that could have far-reaching consequences. Is this the situation where a disabled teenager was confronted by police, while doing volunteer work?" Sarah Kim asked, her microphone ready and camera rolling. Dr. Williams stepped forward, his educator's instincts recognizing both the opportunity and the danger of media attention. "This is Eli Morrison, one of our finest students and volunteers. He was delivering medication to elderly residents as part of our community service program when he was confronted and had the police called on him." Sarah Kim turned her attention to Karen, who suddenly looked very small despite her earlier bravado. "Ma'am, can you explain why you felt it necessary to call 911 on a teenager delivering medication?" I thought he was acting suspicious," Karen stammered, realizing how weak her justification sounded on camera. "I was just trying to protect my neighborhood." "Protect it from what?" "Exactly. From a disabled teenager helping elderly residents." The reporter's questions were pointed and professional, but they exposed the fundamental absurdity of Karen's actions. Mrs. Patterson, despite her age and frailty, stepped forward to defend Eli once more. "This young man has been nothing but helpful and professional. He makes sure I get my insulin on time. He's polite and respectful, and he does it all despite his own challenges. What happened here today is a disgrace." The camera captured every word, every expression, every moment of the unfolding drama. Karen's face grew paler as she realized the full scope of what she had initiated. Her attempt to protect her neighborhood had instead exposed it to national scrutiny and potential controversy. Dr. Williams seized the moment to make a broader point. "Eli represents everything we hope to achieve in our community service program. He's overcome personal challenges to help others. He's shown dedication and reliability, and he's done it all with grace and dignity. The fact that he was treated as a criminal for having a disability is unacceptable." Officer Martinez, recognizing the shift in the situation, took steps to de-escalate. "The young man has been completely cooperative, and his documentation is in order. There's no basis for any charges or further investigation." But the damage to Karen's reputation and standing in the community was just beginning. Janet Rodriguez, the neighbor with her own disabled son, stepped forward to address the camera. "What happened here today represents everything that's wrong with how we treat people with disabilities," she said passionately. "This woman saw someone walking differently and immediately assumed criminal behavior. That's not vigilance. That's discrimination." More neighbors had gathered, and the consensus was overwhelmingly against Karen's actions. People who had lived on Maple Street for years, who knew her reputation for nosiness and complaint-making, were finally seeing her behavior in a new light. Tom Anderson, a retired teacher who lived 3 houses down, shook his head in disgust. "I've seen this boy walking through the neighborhood for weeks. It was obvious he had some kind of physical challenge, but he was always polite, always purposeful. How could anyone think he was a threat?" The incident was rapidly evolving from a simple misunderstanding into a community reckoning with its own biases and assumptions. The presence of the media meant that the story would spread far beyond Maple Street, potentially reaching thousands of people. Sarah Kim interviewed several more neighbors, documenting the growing support for Eli and the increasing isolation of Karen. The narrative was clear: a dedicated student volunteer had been victimized by prejudice and fear, and a community was rallying to his defense. But the story took another significant turn when Dr. Williams received a phone call from the district superintendent, who had been monitoring the news coverage. The school district was prepared to take action to protect their student and their program. "I've just been informed that the district is prepared to pursue all available legal remedies to protect Eli and our community service program," Dr. Williams announced to the gathered crowd. This includes potential civil rights violations and defamation claims. Karen's face went white at the mention of legal action. Her husband was a lawyer, and she knew exactly what such claims could mean for their family's reputation and finances. What had started as a phone call to police was now threatening to destroy everything she had worked to build. Legal action. But I was just, she began. But her words trailed off as she realized there was no justification that would hold up to scrutiny. Mrs. Patterson, despite her age and physical limitations, stepped forward once more. Young lady, you owe this boy an apology. A public, sincere apology for what you put him through. The demand for an apology was taken up by other neighbors, and soon there was a chorus of voices calling for Karen to make amends. But her pride and embarrassment made genuine contrition difficult. I'm sorry if I misunderstood the situation, she said stiffly, the conditional nature of her apology satisfying no one. If you misunderstood, Janet Rodriguez repeated incredulously, there's no if about it. You called the police on a disabled teenager for delivering medicine to an elderly woman. That's not a misunderstanding. That's prejudice. The reporter continued to document the exchange, recognizing that she was witnessing a powerful human interest story about disability rights, community responsibility, and the consequences of assumptions and bias. Eli, who had remained largely quiet during the confrontation, finally found his voice. His words, when they came, were measured and thoughtful, revealing the maturity and character that had made him such a successful volunteer. I just want people to understand that having a disability doesn't make someone suspicious or dangerous, he said to the camera. I'm just trying to help people in my community, the same way anyone else would. I hope this doesn't discourage other students from volunteering. His grace under pressure, his focus on others despite his own ordeal, made a powerful impression on everyone present. Even Officer Chen, who had initially been suspicious, was clearly moved by the teenager's dignity and composure. Dr. Williams put a protective arm around Eli's shoulders. This young man represents the best of what we're trying to achieve in our schools and our community. His response to this situation shows exactly why he was chosen for our community service program. The incident was winding down, but its implications were just beginning to unfold. The news story would air that evening, reaching thousands of viewers and generating discussion about disability rights, community policing, and the dangers of assumption and prejudice. Karen realized that her actions had not only hurt an innocent teenager, but had also damaged her own standing in the community she had claimed to protect. Neighbors who had previously tolerated her complaints and nosiness were now seeing her in a very different light. As the police officers prepared to leave, Officer Martinez approached Eli with a mixture of regret and respect. Son, I want to apologize for how this situation escalated. You handled yourself with real class, and I hope this doesn't discourage you from your volunteer work. Eli nodded, accepting the apology with the same grace he had shown throughout the ordeal. Thank you, officer. I understand you were just doing your job. The contrast between Eli's maturity and Karen's defensive behavior was stark and telling. Even in the face of injustice and humiliation, the teenager had maintained his dignity and composure. As the media crew packed up their equipment and the crowd began to disperse, Mrs. Patterson invited Eli inside to complete his delivery. The insulin she needed was still in his bag, and despite everything that had happened, his commitment to her care remained his primary concern. Come on, dear, she said, taking his arm gently. Let's get this medicine sorted out, and then I'll make you a cup of tea. I think we both need it after all this excitement. Their departure left Karen standing alone on the sidewalk, the weight of her actions and their consequences settling heavily upon her. The neighbors who remained continued to discuss the incident, their voices carrying a new understanding of the importance of looking beyond surface appearances. That evening, the story led the local news broadcast. Sarah Kim's report was thorough and thoughtful, highlighting both the specific incident and its broader implications for how society treats people with disabilities. The footage of Eli's dignified responses and the community's rallying support created a powerful narrative of resilience and hope. The story quickly gained traction on social media, with viewers sharing their own experiences of discrimination and prejudice. The hashtag #JoshEliDelivers began trending, celebrating both his specific volunteer work and the broader contributions of people with disabilities to their communities. Dr. Williams used the attention to highlight the school district's commitment to inclusive education and community service. Donations poured in to support the community service program, and volunteers stepped forward to expand its reach to more neighborhoods. Within days, Karen faced the full consequences of her actions. Her husband's law firm, concerned about the negative publicity, asked her to maintain a low profile. Several neighbors who had previously socialized with her made it clear that her behavior was unacceptable and unwelcome. More significantly, Eli's family, supported by the ACLU and disability rights organizations, filed a civil rights lawsuit against Karen for harassment and defamation. The legal action sought both monetary damages and policy changes to prevent similar incidents. The lawsuit alleged that Karen's actions constituted discrimination based on disability, creating a hostile environment that interfered with Eli's right to participate fully in his community. The case would eventually settle out of court, with Karen paying substantial damages and agreeing to participate in disability awareness training. But perhaps the most significant consequence was the change in the Maple Street community itself. The incident had forced residents to confront their own assumptions and biases, leading to conversations about inclusion, diversity, and community responsibility. Mrs. Patterson became something of a neighborhood celebrity, with her fierce defense of Eli earning her widespread admiration. She used her newfound platform to advocate for better understanding of disability issues and the importance of community support for vulnerable populations. Eli continued his volunteer work with even greater determination, knowing that his efforts were making a difference, not just in delivering medications, but in changing hearts and minds. The community service program expanded to include disability awareness training for all participants, ensuring that future volunteers would be better prepared to handle challenges and misconceptions. The Riverside High School Community Service Program received national recognition for its innovative approach to civic engagement and its commitment to inclusion. Eli was invited to speak at conferences and events, sharing his story and advocating for the rights and dignity of people with disabilities. His message was always the same, that disability is just one aspect of a person's identity, and that everyone has something valuable to contribute to their community. His example of grace under pressure, commitment to service, and refusal to be defined by others' prejudices inspired countless others to pursue their own paths of service and advocacy. The incident on Maple Street had started with ignorance and fear, but it ended with understanding and hope. A community that had been divided by suspicion and assumption came together around shared values of compassion and inclusion. Karen's attempt to protect her neighborhood had instead exposed it to scrutiny and criticism, but ultimately led to positive changes that made it stronger and more welcoming. The boy who walked different had taught them all a lesson about the difference between being different and being dangerous, between disability and inability, between fear and understanding. In the months that followed, Eli continued his deliveries throughout the neighborhood, but now he was greeted with smiles and waves from residents who had learned to see beyond his distinctive gait to the dedicated, caring young man beneath. His story became a testament to the power of perseverance, the importance of community support, and the possibility of transformation even in the face of prejudice and discrimination. The boy who had simply wanted to help deliver medicine to elderly neighbors had ended up delivering something far more valuable: a lesson in human dignity, community responsibility, and the courage to stand up for what is right. His legacy would live on in the changed hearts and minds of everyone who witnessed his grace under pressure and his unwavering commitment to service. And Mrs. Patterson, who had defended him so fiercely that autumn afternoon, never missed a chance to tell visitors about the remarkable young man who delivered her insulin and, in doing so, delivered hope to an entire community. Her medicine arrived on time, every time, carried by steady hands that shook not from impairment, but from the determination to make a difference in the world, one delivery at a time.